Hello and welcome everyone. I'm your Stefan Burns. Today with a special report. There is a very significant planetary alignment that is occurring in 3 days. Specifically, actually, it's already started, but it goes most precise on July 29th. This is a Jupiter, Sun, Earth, Moon, so that's a full moon, Juno, and also Pluto alignment. And the larger context is that there is a basket configuration between the outer planets in addition to this alignment. At the same time, this Jupiter-Pluto axis, this opposition that occurs about every 6-7 years or so, being the top of the basket. So the Earth is moving into this alignment, having a full moon at the same time. You also have the asteroid Juno in this alignment with Pluto, and this is significant because if you look at the archetypal significations of these planets, then, and you also just see what's happening with the world, you start to get a sense that really big things are already going down underneath the surface, out of sight, but eventually those tectonic shifts will be felt here at the surface. Now, across time, there have been lots of financial resets. Over centuries and thousands of years, this has happened. You can look at the Roman Empire, for example, and the slow devaluing of their currency, the denarius and solidus and all these others. It took the Roman Empire 200 plus years to finally collapse, with the financial policies that they were enacting contributing to that greatly. There's an acceleration, though, that has occurred. And now with fiat currency, it's only getting faster and faster, and we're right now in this free fall stage. And there's other historic factors at play right now that are contributing to what I see, at least in the stars, with the planets, everything, as being pretty significant. So that's what we're going to cover today. We're going to cover this alignment. You may wonder why I have right here the Middle East centered on the map. Well, it didn't start here. It actually started decades ago, as I just described. But this was a big trigger. Of course, the Iran war starting up on the 28th of February, the closing of the Strait of Hormuz. Now the Bab el-Mandeb is closed due to the Houthi rebels, and so two of the main conduits of oil and gas traffic, basically, the flows, are now closed. Huge supply shock. We've never seen a supply shock this big. I don't think really ever. This is more barrels being cut off from the global demand than in the 70s. According to the experts that are tracking this, and just we know the flows before and after the war. So this is very significant. It's taken a bit of time for this to actually filter into the consciousness and awareness of what this means. And we know that this is by far the most important thing that's happening this year, as it relates to impacting the world, every single person, that type of deal, because this is affecting everybody. When oil prices go up, inflation goes up. If you go over to Asia, they get most of their energy demands met through oil and gas from the Middle East. They're ready now at critical lows with their strategic reserves because they were using them to offset the supply shock that occurred in the first 5 months of the war. Now it's totally shut down and supply levels are at record lows. Same with the United States, other places as well. There's only so much rerouting that can be done this direction, and of course that only really helps Europe. And there's also crazy weather that's happening. So for example, places that put in lots of solar panels, and I think solar panels are great in most situations, but they're having these crazy hailstorms, wildfires, all this. One hailstorm comes by over your solar panel field, it can destroy all of them. So we're seeing just a massive energy supply shock, but it's really originating here. Now, why am I mentioning that? Because this validates our thesis as to the planets being an accurate measure of the quality of time. That's basically the way you can think about it. It's not that the planets necessarily cause these effects. It's just that they tell us what the nature of time and societal issues and even Earth events and more are resonating around these alignments. And so let us look really quick back to February of 2026. We're going to spend some time here in this application solar system scope. We're also going to be looking at different financial markets and such. If you're new here, hello and welcome. I'm your host, Stefan Burns. But let's go back to February 21st. We will see this Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Pisces, true sky, the actual constellations. Now, online, most astrologers use Western tropical astrology. It's a system that is more than 2,000 years old. It's offset now from the true position of the constellations, but it's still in line with the equinoctial and solstitial markers, right? So where we have equinox, solstice, that's holding that alignment from 2,000 plus years ago. And those are useful measures. This occurred on the equinoctial marker, the spring equinox. So March 21st, it occurred right on that alignment, though you see that this was actually on the 21st of February. So, and that alignment in Western tropical is at 0 degrees of Aries. So there's a whole bunch of hubbub is made about that because this is the beginning of the zodiac and, signifying, big civilization shifts. And I don't think Western tropical is necessarily wrong. The more I study into this, it's more, okay, well, you have a main flow of truth, for example, like a river flowing down, a main flow of truth, you get vortices off on the sides, little whirlpools that spin off, right? Western tropical is one of those. So there's energy there, and there's some truth there, but it's not the main flow because we can use the Iran war as a very clear consequence. Okay, so 0 degrees of Aries, fire sign, cardinal, kind of militaristic a little bit. You could look at what happened to the Iran war, bombs being dropped as a clear indication of that happening. But let's look at the true sky. We have this occurring in Pisces at the neck, right? And here you have Saturn and Neptune. Saturn is about structures, limits, boundaries, even like reorganizations. Neptune is directly connected to oil. Oil and gas, flow, movement, oceans, right? Neptune or Poseidon, god of the oceans. And Pisces is representative of the ocean. So you have a perfect signification here of a block and a limit and a reorganization of oil traveling through the oceans. You can't get more clear than that. And these disruptions still existed even when there were ceasefires and bombs weren't being dropped. So I think the fiery Aries signification is one of these vortices off from the main flow, the main truth of, well, this is clearly a blockage of oil traveling freely around the globe. And then in addition to that, you have the U.S. implementing a naval blockade after Iran said they were going to do that, and everyone knows the news to some degree. I'm not here to just, repeat this stuff ad nauseum. But it's a very clear sign that that conjunction, the first time we had a Saturn-Neptune conjunction in 37 years, was right on the money in terms of archetypal signification. You consider that the United States is a superpower because it's a naval superpower. You look at the prior superpower for the world, and guess what? It was Great Britain. Why were they a superpower? Because they were a naval superpower, right? You had a continental superpower with France back in the early 1800s, Napoleon, right? His Grande Armée sweeping across the continent. Hungary, Austria. You have the Confederated States of Germany pushing all the way into Russia. Making truces, eventually, having some defeat there, also defeat in the Iberian Peninsula. But at one point in 1809, he was king of Europe. One of the main reasons that it all collapsed was he was unable to put a limit on the seafaring power of Great Britain. They had naval dominance. They knocked out the French fleet multiple times. Also, some neutral fleets, they squashed that because they were fearful that Napoleon would get a hold of those ships and be able to use them now and kind of have a return to naval power. That was really when the matchup between France and Great Britain was settled. Before that, there was some back and forth, and of course you also at one point had Spain and Portugal being naval powers, etc. But after the Napoleonic Wars, the United Kingdom was the undisputed naval power that allowed them to exploit their worldwide colony networks and trade and more, and then effectively they kind of ceded that role of being the world superpower to the United States in World War II, though even a little bit before that we started to have the US be a sleeping giant of productivity and more. But the United States in general is the superpower because of its naval dominance. And so here again we're seeing these limits and blocks to the flow of ships and oil and more through the Strait of Hormuz and now also the Bab el-Mandeb Strait here. So two major choke points. Huge disruption. Oil's already gone up like crazy. We can check that out right here. If you look at Brent crude, we see the run-up that started with basically the Iran war. I mean, you can see that there was actually a little bit of movement beforehand, but right there you see a sudden massive jump up in the price. Let's even switch to our 1 day. And somehow, you know, the markets were swayed that things are going to be fine, and all this back and forth nonsense and lies and deceit and trickery and everything that we're all well aware of. And, you know, then there's this memorandum of understanding, which is bullshit. Here's where we are now. So clearly a big increase up. There's really not much that the United States can do at this point to stop Iran because we keep hitting them, yet it doesn't really actually seem to affect them all that much in terms of their ability to keep these two straits closed. Like they still have areas where they can launch rockets from, or these drones or whatever. It's asymmetric. Our ability to, well, not our ability, the ability of the United States military, run by a few select crazy individuals, is greatly diminished as compared to what they want to do because Iran is decentralized. So we're already seeing this occur. If we go back to our alignment, here it is. So there is Jupiter, there's the Sun, there is the Earth, there's the Moon. That's the main alignment. But you also have Pluto there in the distance, and in fact you also have Juno. Juno is at opposition today on the 26th. So opposition means that it's Sun, Earth, and then whatever's in opposition. It's also Pluto opposition. Now this alignment, this Pluto-Jupiter alignment, actually was most precise back here, around the 4th of July in fact, which is when we had this Mars-Uranus conjunction. You see heliocentrically, it's right around the 4th of July. This is when we had this Mars-Uranus conjunction in Taurus, which is related to financial systems, also the Earth itself. So we could be looking at big Earth shifts simultaneous with these big societal shifts. But we're still very much in this alignment because it's a slow-moving period, and Earth really directly participates, again, here on the 29th because of this full moon. So what are the significations? Well, let me just kind of read through the list that I jotted down. And we'll start with Jupiter. Jupiter is related to expansion, inflation, faith, wisdom, learning, also good luck. And here it is in the constellation of Cancer, which is constellation really of like the home, the family. It's also a constellation of power, maternal power and more. So Jupiter, the good guy, is there basically on the side of the people. That's how I interpret that. It's on the side of the people right now. But then we have the Sun there as well. The Sun is representative, of course, of like consciousness, energy, awareness. There are going to be things happening, of course, that we're just really not conscious of or not really placing much importance on them. But the Sun is shining this spotlight on this dynamic. Then you have the Earth, which is where we are. So we don't really need to explain the Earth too much. But But then you also have the moon. What does the moon represent? Well, the moon represents fortune, the ebbs and flows of fortune. And tidal shifts, like, you know, waves coming in, waves going out. So you have a full moon. Full moon is the fact that now you have this energy climax in an event. So you have this climactic event as it relates to the lunar ebb and flow of fortune. Where is this happening? It's happening in Capricorn, the constellation of Capricorn, which is related to structures and finances and organizations and governments and, you know, these patriarchal systems that are controlling. That's a perfect representation of Capricorn. Pluto is representative of secrets, wealth, transformation, life and death, often these kind of subterranean influences that we're not aware of but can get brought to light. And what's Juno represent? Now, we don't see Juno here on solar system scope, but Juno is above the ecliptic plane, exactly conjunct right now at this time as well. Juno is the wife of Zeus. Well, that's actually Hera, if we use the Greek terminology. Hera, or Juno, is the wife of Zeus or Jupiter. And Juno is representative of organizations and also of institutional power, contracts, and partnership. Because Jupiter, well, Zeus, Jupiter is running around, frolicking, having bunches of fun with other gods and mortals. And Hera is always going after them and putting structures and limits in place. And so we have this archetype of Pluto conjunct Juno in Capricorn, representative of like secret partnerships or contracts that are wealth creating, organizations and indebtedness, things of this nature, being brought to light by the sun in opposition to the will and the desire of the people, which is representative of Jupiter in Cancer. And then you have the moon there acting as this trigger of sudden swings of fortune. This is one archetypal interpretation you can make for this. But in addition to that, you also have this larger basket. So you have Uranus, Neptune, in configuration there. Saturn still loosely conjunct Neptune, so it's still in play, and this is the original conjunction. So this is a very significant planetary alignment that's active, and it's the third most significant, or one of the top three most significant alignments of this year, I would say, or definitely top five. Let's go back to look at some of the others. If we go back here, we will see when we were actually at Jupiter opposition. So now we're at the opposite of this. Right here it's Sun, Earth, Jupiter. Right now it's Jupiter, Sun, Earth. So this is half a synodic cycle later. But this is where we were at the beginning of January. And we see that this is a significant alignment. You also have Pluto there. This alignment kind of spread out actually over most of January. You see that it's now a little bit more aligned with Pluto right here. But in general, the alignment was most specific around like the 8th of January or so. But what do we have happen shortly after this alignment? Well, if we look at Earth events, we can go here to the 21st of January. Here's the alignment that existed at that time. And we were looking at this more than a year in advance and talking about some significant space weather. But let me show you what happened. Here we see the aurora on the 21st of January. We had this massive solar storm hit us, anomalously strong at 91 nanotesla. The initial choppy part, where the magnetic field is swinging up and down, is what drove this storm, and then it flipped northward with its field, which allows for a good connection to Jupiter's magnetic field because it's the opposite of Earth's, but a poor connection to ours. So we could have had a really big solar storm impact. It was already a G5 minus storm, nearly a G5 storm. The magnetic field strength was insane. So the fact that it flipped northward is the thing that basically saved us from probably some pretty significant technological disruptions, satellites, power grids, and more. as it was, I mean, this is already crazy. This is footage taken over, I think, Lake Michigan. Okay? So, I mean, you don't see this every day. This is pretty wild. Well, we are now at the other end of that synodic cycle, with now it being Jupiter, Sun, Earth. Another significant alignment that occurred in between this one, well, we already mentioned it, but we'll go forward to the next one. This is not like a multi-planet alignment like the others, but here again, we see on the 21st of February, this Saturn-Neptune conjunction, once every 37 years. That's big, and I think just looking at that one, clearly true sky is more accurate than Western tropical, if you look at that, because it's happening in Pisces, which is representative of the ocean. It's so direct, it's like a 5-year-old could connect the dots here. So this really shows me that true sky is more accurate, and that Western is like, you know, sub-eddy that's still at times truthful and accurate, but doesn't fully capture everything. Well, you go forward a little bit more, and you have this very significant alignment right here. You have this Earth, Venus, Uranus, Pleiades alignment. And in fact, it's an Earth, Venus, Uranus, Sedna Pleiades alignment. Now Venus is an evening star. She's now appearing in the evening sky. She's also a benefic agent of fortune and finance and wealth. Of course, during this time, there's been a huge increase in the stock market, though now that's starting to change. We're going to look at some of the data for that. Sedna being this trans-Neptunian dwarf object or dwarf planet that is extending out super far into space, 1,000 astronomical units, so it's close to its perihelion right now, so it's the closest that'll get, as a super elliptical orbit. The Pleiades is the largest and closest interstellar star cluster to Earth, made up of hundreds of high vibrational stars, because they are more blue shifted and they release tons of ultraviolet and X-ray radiation as compared to our yellow dwarf star here. And Uranus being the planet of consciousness, of Promethean change, of shakeups and liberation. So we're seeing some pretty big shifts occur as a result of these alignments. We had gold and silver go crazy and do a massive run up right around the time of this alignment here, which we've seen, and I tracked, talking about that last year, how these alignments at this specific location in general, going back to 1980, 2010 and 2011 and 2026, have seen there be huge increases in the precious metals. That's exactly what we saw. So now we're on the other end of this with this alignment here, the end of July, that's taking part as this basket configuration, which is such a rare alignment, thousands of years to get such precise angles between Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, that it really speaks to a much bigger shift that is unfolding at this time. So the signification is there, the historic alignment potential, and just in general, again, the quality of the time is manifesting and saying, basically showing itself. And well, we have more to go, because we're already seeing now these cracks are spreading. So we already looked here at oil. It just immediately charged back up with some of these new announcements. We can look at a few different symbols. Just look at, for example, what's happening. Let's go to the NASDAQ. You already see the NASDAQ having decreased quite a bit, going from 30,700 down now to 28,000. But the kind of the key thing to note here is that there is a trend line where it has touched basically every single time going up. And the more you touch these support lines, the faster they are to break. And so this is now at that critical point where it's touched it like 4 or 5 times. I think it's going to break down. We'll find out. I mean, there doesn't seem to be any easy resolution to this conflict with Iran. That's the key. Because if there's a resolution there and the oil can start flowing again, great. But now these shifts have taken place. It's the Saturn-Neptune alignment, it's going to probably take time all the way for Saturn to leave Pisces, because Neptune is going to be there for a decade plus. It's probably only going to be until Saturn leaves the constellation Pisces, which is a big constellation, that we start to actually return to a more normal flow and movement of goods and oil around the world, right? And there's not these maritime disruptions. That's probably now been triggered and will continue through the rest of the transit through Pisces. But we can also type in the South Korean index here. We look at the KOSPI composite index. Of course, the Koreans are really wild. They really run this stuff up. And they've been having some of the biggest increases because of, for example, Samsung and some of the other memory chip manufacturers are based out of South Korea. But it went up to 9,400 or so. Now it's coming in there at 6,700. So it's had a pretty significant decline. Now, it doesn't mean it can't just continue to go up, but this is a sort of initial movement that you would see before a big, big decline. Because for you to get there, let's say, or wherever it's going to be, you first need to do that. And if you watch markets, you know that you'll often get this big kind of drop at the beginning. There's still optimism and hope in the market, which then can cause a relief rally, and then you finally get real capitulation. I mean, we can go back to the the Great Depression to check that out. Let's see if this will give us the time going all the way back. We do our 6-month range. Yeah, here we go. This goes back to the 1800s. So here's the Great Depression. And we're really in similar situations, in my opinion. But let's switch this now back to 1 week. Oh no, okay. Well, we're just going to have to scroll over there. Not that hard to do. Okay, so here's the Great Depression. See that you hit this peak, sharp sell off, right? There's your relief rally. And then there's another one. And then they get smaller each time until eventually people just lose all hope. So yeah, maybe you continue to rally off of there. Eventually, though, we'll be having some sort of scenario like this. Eventually, it's almost just all the signs are lining up right now. We can go to the yen, the US dollar, and Japanese yen. Let's see what's happening here. This is important because now for about 40 years, the Bank of Japan has basically been subsidizing stock markets and just in general financial investment around the world because they've kept their interest rates near zero. So basically, it's very simple. If interest rates are zero, you can take out a loan and you really don't have to pay all that much to then eventually pay it off. Whereas if you can get 5% or even 10% in the US stock market, right, then you just pull off some money to pay off eventually, what you bought from Japan. So that now has changed because the Bank of Japan started raising the rates, and actually the free market has been pricing it much higher than that. And so what we're seeing is that we're seeing this massive devaluation of the yen versus the dollar now, because now that carry trade is unwinding. You can't get easy money from Japan anymore. So not only is there inflation occurring, they also have higher interest rate payments that they have to do. And Japan is the most indebted nation, or one of the most indebted. I mean, it's like huge. I think it's 150 or 250% of GDP. I mean, it's a massive amount. I think it's 250% of GDP. So they have to, that's why they kept them near zero or even negative. You had to actually pay to take money from Japan, but it wasn't much. But still, because you're making so much, you weren't worried about that. Japan wasn't paying you, you were paying them. But of course, they were actually subsidizing the entire global financial system through their lost decades. Well, this is finally broken. We see that we're now charging up quickly. We were battering on the 160 level for months. If we go to our weekly view, we can see how we were going. And there were some periods where Japan actually put a massive amount of money into the market to stabilize the exchange rate under 160 yen per dollar. That didn't hold. Now we're finally breaking into new territory. And if we look at the long-term trend, right, we're probably just simply going up at this point. So yen is going to be devalued, right? We already have multiple countries in hyperinflation spirals. You have Egypt with their pound, you have Turkey with their lira, you have Argentina with their peso, you have Lebanon. I mean, there's a whole laundry list of countries which are already experiencing hyperinflation, and that is only accelerating as this continues. If we go to the, what is it, the 30-year? Do we want the 30-year? We'll look at the 10-year and the 30-year. Maybe we look at the 10-year, see where we are. Yeah, so here's our 10-year yield on U.S. government bonds, and right now it's sitting at 4.68%. See how we have a similar pattern right here? We've just been battering against that. Well, that's the sort of pattern that eventually will break up to the upside, because every single time you hit resistance, you weaken it, we're going to probably move through that. If we go to our US 30-year, it's even higher at 5.161% right now. Same pattern, but you can see that this is very likely going to resolve to the upside. And this era of easy lending basically is over. So you take out a loan, you got to pay some interest on that, and it's going to be a lot of interest. Inflation is high. You know, there was never a recovery from inflation as it relates to COVID. Inflation is still over 3.5%. Of course, it's going to rocket up now with oil having rocketed up again, these new closures and more. That in general is devaluing everything. It's really pretty significant situation. You have big names now undergoing big corrections. So you have Tesla here. If we look at Tesla, go to their, let's look at their one-day chart. You see they gapped down with their earnings because basically their earnings were terrible last quarter. So a huge gap down. That's one example. You also have, what's another one that recently just hit? You have Alphabet, Google, and I'm not sure which one of these it is. It's probably both. You see that Google gap down because they basically missed targets and they announced even more capital expenditure into AI. And all this AI spending is super circular. So it's NVIDIA giving OpenAI $100 million for AI software investment. And then OpenAI buys $100 million of Blackwell chips from NVIDIA. And it's all this circular spending. Meanwhile, you have private equity at the highest levels, like these private equity markets at super high levels, which is very non-transparent. This is really that Pluto and Juno aspect in opposition to Jupiter, right? You have these private loans that are failing, they're going under, but they're able to sometimes like refinance them or roll them into some new derivative or something. You can kick the can for some time before eventually it doesn't work out. So we're starting to see big, like the main market movers experience pretty significant declines quickly. I mean, another good example is the biggest IPO that ever occurred, which is SpaceX. Look at the IPO for SpaceX. Look at this. This is madness. I mean, basically, I was waiting for this to happen. Huge run up, right? Now it's worth like $2+ trillion. Based off of what? We really don't know. They're launching junk into space, burning up the ozone layer, crashing rocket parts into the moon. And then look at this plummet down. Now it's 115. It's below their allocation IPO price. They have a massive unlock coming in just, I think, a couple weeks or less. And well, it's really not looking good for the largest IPO ever, right? This was the first of a few AI IPOs. The next two, which may or may not happen, I mean, they're going to happen at some point, are going to be OpenAI and Anthropic. And those are expected to be very, very big, but we're not seeing with the data, because we have enough now, we're not seeing that artificial intelligence, as they call it, it's really probably not even the right abbreviation or name for it, but artificial intelligence, as they call it, is able to generate, significant, robust financial returns. It may be kind of a zero-sum game. I mean, we'll find out, but it hallucinates too much, and just because you throw more compute at it doesn't make it all of a sudden actually intelligent and creative like a human being can be, right? It's good at averaging data, which can be amazing for certain things, but I mean, people have done studies where, for example, they train AI on like a data set from pre-1930, and then they ask it to, they kind of coax it to maybe discover something from 1935, and it doesn't do so because it's trained on that 1930 and before data, and it'll be like racist and all these things. So it's not, there have been some good things done with it in cooperation with someone or people. There's been some mathematical discoveries that AI has helped assist, because a mathematician is able to go in there and prompt it very specifically to explore a certain area and just simply do like bulk calculations, which then lead to discovery. But it's not what it's being portrayed to be. The world's richest man is saying that everyone's going to be a high net worth individual because of AI, and no one's going to have to work. Well, that's clearly just bullshit, right? Just a made up fantasy. I'm not saying it's bad. I think there's an optimistic future that involves this technology, because we have to hope that's the case. But I think there's a lot of lies being said about this, and also a lot of delusional optimism. So not everyone is like evil, right? Some people simply, they're in such an echo chamber that they believe what is just resonating. But there's also some people are very clearly, lying to get you to prop this up, because right now retail investors are what are keeping the market up. Like the amount of retail investors that are buying the dips right now is huge. It's the perfect environment for institutional to then dump. Because when you do get a big crash, dollars is what you want. Eventually the metals will go up, gold, silver, and then also commodities, food, things of this nature. Food's never a bad play. Like, make sure you plant a garden and everything. Make sure you have some actual money in your pockets, right? But all these fake monies that exist in the 21st century, in the 20th century, they will be relics in the long run and fossils, and true money will always exist. So we're seeing just really big, profound changes in the financial markets. Now, to kind of go back here, I just want to point out a couple things from Steiner. I'm reading his book, Interdisciplinary Astronomy, right now. I've read the first 4 lectures. There's 12 lectures. I think it's 12. And it's really quite interesting. And, we can look at the planets, and nowadays, an astronomer looks at this really as just math and physics, right? You have Kepler's laws of motion, you have Newton's laws of force and gravity, for example, and now even, they're looking at the universe from the lens of Einstein and relativity. But there are many different models that you can use to accurately describe the motion of the planets through the heavens. Now, we use the Copernican model, which is that the sun is at the center of the solar system, and we have observations, so we know that's true. But as it actually relates to you're on the ground and you want to track where something's going to be and have an ability to forecast it, you can actually use the older models like Ptolemy and more. there's quite a few that exist that if you just simply need to know where something's going to be, you can use them. So the point is that we have this physical reality that we interact with. We look up and we see, right? We're being informed by the cosmos. By actually turning our gaze upwards and observing what's happening, we are then being imprinted with that information, that knowledge, that consciousness. From our perspective, we can actually track it a variety of ways. But you can most accurately track it with, these more now modern mathematical laws and physical rules and everything, like, again, Newton and Kepler and more. Well, the thing is that if you were to actually, if we actually track this out, at some point it all breaks down. Because let's use the Earth for example, okay? Here's the Earth. You notice that, well, let's look at Mercury. Mercury very clearly has an ellipse for its orbit. So it's not a perfect circle. The sun is offset from the center of its oval. Okay? Well, the Earth has that too. All the planets have, ellipses. They all trace ellipses in their orbit. Well, that changes over time. On about a 100,000 year time scale, Earth's orbit will be either A, very circular, or at its most elliptical. Okay? It'll get really close to the sun and then very far away. It's a pretty big swing. Actually, you'll get like 25% more solar energy coming in when it's at its most elliptical, but also 25% at its furthest versus when it's nearly a perfect circle. Again, it's about a 100,000 year time frame. But you also have inclination. We notice here, see Mercury right there has a little bit of inclination to its orbit. Or a good example is Pluto. See how Pluto there? There's the orbit of Pluto. See how it's tracing this inclined orbit? So there's inclination. Well, inclination also varies over time. So you have the orbit actually pulsing and breathing. It's not static anymore. You have these inclination changes. You have, because of inclination, you have what are known as nodes, where the inclined plane of that planet intersects the solar equatorial plane or the ecliptic plane, which is made by the Earth. Those nodes move around. The point is that what we observe is very, very complex and nuanced, and it's always changing. And so if you run those calculations out, we really basically lose the ability to actually predict and forecast this stuff. We can only track this out so far. It's known as the three-body problem. And so there's a certain point where the mathematics and the physics breaks down in our ability for us to accurately construct this reality that we know exists and we observe, right? So there's a limit there. Now, what Steiner talked about is how it's at that boundary that you start to encounter objective reality. So math and physics will take you to a certain point. They're super useful and they're amazing and awesome and they help us push the boundaries, but there is still room beyond that. The other thing that he wrote about is this idea of, and this is back in 1921, mind you, still very true now, this idea about how we had earlier systems of astronomy and every new system that then replaced it looked at the prior system as antiquated, outdated, and no longer useful. But his philosophy and his perception of things was that humanity is given certain tools at certain times to push the boundary forward, but that's a new tool to use in addition to the prior ones. So all this math and physics that we use now for tracking the motion of the planets and astronomical changes and everything doesn't necessarily supersede and invalidate prior astronomical traditions, which involved the interpretation of the planets as certain archetypal energies and telling us the quality of the time, right? Astrology. It just simply adds into now our more full understanding of the cosmos. And because you have that three-body problem, that limit with physics and math, beyond that is where the archetypes live. And we see them reflected in our day-to-day in our society across time, civilization across time, and more. So that's really the sign that there's a lot more to this, and that we should pay attention to some degree to these sort of alignments and the forces that they're indicating are active at this time. Because, well, that's the very first science that was ever in existence. You know, astronomy and astrology were once the same, and that is the oldest science to man, because everyone, going back to Australopithecus, was looking up at the stars. Fire came second. Before that, it was everyone could see the night sky, track the movement of the planets. That is the very first science. And now, because they've been split in the modern zeitgeist, now not everyone, some people still practice it, like everyone here on this channel, right? But a lot of people look now just as astronomy as the only truth, and they discount everything else. But all that other stuff, again, is actually what exists beyond the math and the physics. That's where you have God. That's where you have God in the math and the physics. You also have God beyond that, right? Because there's much more to God than we fully know. To say that we have God figured out is very ignorant and foolish. So when there are these signs, it's good for us to pay attention. So I wanted to bring this to your attention because it really seems that we're in for a pretty seismic shift. Jupiter-Pluto synodic cycles and their conjunctions, squares, and oppositions, and also like trines and sextiles, but really the oppositions and the conjunctions are very clear signatures of wealth and power. If you look at people's natal charts, you will often see the richest people have these Jupiter-Pluto aspects very strongly in their chart. So that's already connected in with that. Then you have it happening in the constellation of Capricorn, which is connected into institutions and governments and financial systems and patriarchal systems and more. You see how this is all connected. So it really just seems that this full moon coming up, we may not get something happening exactly on the day of the full moon. Though this next week is pretty critical as it relates to a lot of this stuff and like things finally revealing themselves. But I think it's already happening. I think we're going to see a very clear, significant event that lets everyone know, okay, things are now very serious in the next couple weeks. Probably by the end of August, I think things are going to be much clearer there. But who knows? This is just a forecast. Based on all the available data and more. I mean, clearly the financial system's totally broken for the everyday person. And that is why this is such an opportunity now for the everyday person, in my opinion. Because if we do get this big financial reset, these degenerates which have over-leveraged themselves to oblivion, if you're prepared, you can be very successful, I think, during this upcoming reset. But it's going to be community-based, and it may not necessarily be financial-based, right? I mean, I think it's going to be good to have tangible things that you can take hold of, like precious metals, also land and food production, like energy production, solar panels, for example. Just having like your own off-grid energy solution, water, these sort of things are going to be very, very valuable. Then also community, because if there is some big reset, you can get some big sort of solar flare situation too. But if you get some sort of big reset, it's going to be community that gets you through. It's not going to be your 401k and stock market, I don't think, like your portfolio or something. I personally, we've seen before how they have had no problem taking money from people. Gold confiscation after the Great Depression in the 30s or during the Great Depression, they confiscated gold in the United States. Bank confiscations in, Cyprus. I think it was Cyprus. They confiscated money directly at people's bank accounts because of financial crisis there. So there is precedent for just grabbing your stuff if they make mistakes and they want to fix them. You could be the final bag holder, as they call it. Some super thanks came through. So I want to just mention these super thanks. BGB with some super thanks here. I'm not sure what he's talking about with possums, but thank you for the super thanks, BGB. And Art of Meta, thank you for the super thanks as well. And yeah, it's definitely a very powerful time at this moment. Amanda Roberts, thank you for the super thanks. Do you think this is why Mayon volcano is starting to get intense again? I think that's just because of all the seismic activity that's been striking that area. Shivalush volcano has been very active. Fuego, a lot of volcanoes are very active right now because we've had quite a lot of seismic activity. So I think it's more so that. The planetary alignments, of course, you know, they affect us in some way, but I think it's more because of all the seismic waves. Sonia with a super thanks. Thank you so much. Doing my best. Migrating coconut. Anyone who prays, please pray for my nephew. He's a child recovering from traumatic brain injury. Let's all quickly say a prayer for Coconut's nephew. We don't have his name, but let's say a prayer. Please, God, help this child recover from this traumatic brain injury and to go on to live a full, abundant, healthful life. Thank you. Amen. So prayers for you. And Southern Mama, thank you for the super thanks. Doing my best. Francis, thank you for the super thanks, or for being a member for 7 months, rather. And Migrating Coconut again, Oliver. So his name is Oliver. We are praying for Oliver. Yeah, we really wish him the best. So thanks for sharing that with us. And trust me, we've done prayers like this before on the channel. They are effective. They work. There's thousands of people that will be sending positive energy to Oliver now. So it really is incredible. I mean, you may see like a dramatic turnaround within like a day or two. Like it's wild. We've seen that before. And Francis with a very generous super sticker, so thank you so much. It's really appreciated. BGB with another super thanks, thank you. Shawnee with one, thank you as well. And Nikki with a super thanks as well. So let us now do a cosmic connection meditation. These energies are very powerful. Let's just kind of help things calm down. I guess there's one last thing to mention while we're here. So let me show you that. This is the Jupiter Cazimi. We actually see this on our coronagraph. And so this is Jupiter right there. This is our sun. They put a disk over it, but it's that white circle. So we can see what's emanating from the sun. Past 24 hours have been calm and still. But before that, we did actually have, in fact, a solar storm launch our way. We'll see it here, right there. There is some flashing because there's just the way the satellites are in space right now causes there to be some temporary outages. But you'll notice again at the beginning, you'll see this burst of plasma come from the southern hemisphere of the sun. We'll watch it again right as this resets right here. Give it a watch. That is headed our way, mostly to the south. But if we look at our space weather model, we see that will be intersecting Earth. So this is our 3D visualization, and there it comes in right around the 27th, 28th of July. So really in the next 48 hours, we're going to be getting a space weather impact. And of course that full moon is on the 29th. So we will likely be having increased geomagnetic volatility as this occurs as well. And well, we have the markets. So today's Sunday, so this is all going to be happening during the trading week. And I think we're finally at the point where we're going to start seeing things really start to break down. Tons of earnings are coming out, and already we're seeing huge drawdowns. Like IBM had a massive drawdown too. I didn't mention them. So it's looking pretty serious across the board. Once the big dominoes start to fall, right? They've already been dominating the S&P, let's say, and they're been the main thing responsible for growing these main indices. And so the little guys all of a sudden going to pump like crazy to offset, big losses with the trillion-dollar companies? It's not going to happen. Once it's profitable in general to short and go cash, that's what's going to happen, and we're very close to that. I think it's coming very, very soon. And then things could get really, really wild because, again, everything's so over leveraged, and then really, again, it goes back to this supply shock here. It all started with the closure, which was within 1 week of that Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Perfect archetypal signification, and well, if we look at what's happening right now, true sky, it's indicating some pretty big changes are coming. So we had 2 more Superthanks come in before we get to the sound healing. Migrating Coconut, thank you once more. And then Blue Moon, thank you for the Superthanks as well. People, please say a prayer for her as well. And just for everyone in general that has health problems, this is the time for us to be healing. Look within yourself, figure out what you need to do to heal, to recuperate, regrow. Humans have an intrinsic ability to regenerate, to heal, to thrive. So don't forget that. But fundamentally, the responsibility falls on the individual. But we can help each other collectively. So let's do a cosmic connection meditation. Not a long one, but something is better than nothing. There we go. To sing today, folks. These sort of alignments and just in general these forces at play, it's useful to know what they represent. Solar activity is very much connected into the nervous system, and the Earth and her terrestrial influences are very connected into metabolism, because of course, you know, we eat from the Earth and we are of the Earth, and so that determines our metabolic makeup. But how the energy flows through you is the nervous system, and that's really driven large part by solar activity. Light day cycles, seasons, and more. So as you have these forces converge and combine, this is a really good time to evaluate where you are with your metabolic health, where your nervous system stands. Is it fried? Is it calm and balanced and relaxed, right? Are you in a homeostasis equilibrium that's good for your health, or are you pushing yourself to the edge of ruin? It's not necessarily that solar flare knocks you out, it's that your body knocks you out from the perhaps energy influence that comes in externally from the sun or from the earth. And there's other forces too. Fundamentally, it all rests on you. So now is your opportunity to relax, to breathe deeply, and to release and let go that which does not serve you. nervous system ground by taking a deep physiological sigh. This means you breathe in. And you audibly sigh out. You have to let your body release. Unclench the muscles in your face, your jaw, your neck, shoulders. And there is one more thing that we are going to do, and that is an I Ching. So the I Ching is an ancient Chinese method of divination which provides guidance as to the situation, what is happening, and more. And we are going to cast an I Ching for what we talked about in today's video. So, to do that, you need 3 coins, and you flip them, and you get combinations of heads and tails. I'll lead you all through it. But the question is, for everything we discussed today in this video, the topic, everything in general, what comes next? What comes next? So everything described, what comes next? So you throw the coins 6 times. I will jot down the I Ching. We will then find it on this website I have and read through and contemplate a little bit the message. So for everything we've discussed today, everything, what comes next? We have 2 heads and a tails, which is a yang line. So you put that at the bottom, straight line at the bottom, 2 heads and a tails. Again, a yang line, 2 heads and a tails. And we have a changing line, a yin changing line, which is 3 tails. So that will change into a yang line. So we'll have a creative heaven trigram at the bottom. That'll be interesting. We have now a yin line, 2 tails, and a heads. I wish I had a camera to show you this, but you know, it's not the end of the world. We have another yang line, 2 heads and a tails. And we have a yang line. Wow. Okay. So let's find our I Ching. Here we have, there's 64. So basically with these 6 lines, you get 64 combinations. And so we are looking for 2 yang lines up top. Actually, that one's close. It's not that one. It's going to be 2 yang lines, 2 yang lines, and 2 yin lines next to each other. So like a sandwich. A sandwich. Let's see what we got. Not seeing it yet. Truth. Oh, baby. Oh, Lord. Okay. Now, because also this line right there is a changing line, that'll become a yang line. So let's find, before we click this one and read through it, let's find what it changes into, just to jot it down. So it'll be 3 yang lines on the bottom, a single yin line, and then 2 more yang lines. So we're looking for a trigram that's almost exclusively masculine with only a single feminine influence in it at the 4th line. That one is going to be somewhere. Taming. Number 9, taming. So first we get truth, and then we get taming. I'm already thinking about, taming these powers that be that are not serving the collective of humanity. The truth comes out, and we finally wrest power away from them and tame them into submission. Maybe it's the opposite. Hopefully not. So truth. Number 61, inner truth. Wood over lake. So it's wood over lake. The inner truth. Pigs and fishes, good fortune. It furthers one to cross the great water, perseverance furthers. Wind over the lake, the image of inner truth. Thus the superior man discusses criminal cases in order to delay executions. That's interesting. Ooh. There's been criminal activity, folks. We know that for sure. 3rd line marked. He finds a comrade, now he beats drum, now he stops, now he sobs, now he sings. So if we go down, we get some comments on this. The wind blows over the lake and stirs the surface of the water. Thus, visible effects of the invisible manifest themselves. That's pretty much what we were talking about with this Jupiter-Pluto alignment, right? The hexagram consists of firm lines above and below while it is open in the center. This indicates a heart free of prejudice and therefore open to truth. And that's the way of the future. Open heart chakra is the transformation, the metamorphosis that will change this world. On the other hand, each of the 2 trigrams has a firm line in the middle. This indicates the force of inner truth in the influences they present. The attributes of the 2 trigrams are above. The attributes of the 2 trigrams are above, gentleness, forbearance towards inferiors, and then below, joyousness and obeying superiors. Such conditions create the basis of a mutual confidence that makes achievements possible. The character of Fu, which is truth, is actually the picture of a bird's foot over a fledgling. It suggests the idea of brooding. An egg is hollow. The light-giving power must work to quicken it from outside, but there must be a germ of life within if life is to be awakened. Far-reaching speculations can be linked with these ideas. Judgment. They really wrote a lot out for, I've gone through a lot of these and they've never been this long, the paragraphs. Wow. Okay, the judgment. Pigs and fishes are the least intelligent of all animals and therefore the most difficult to influence. Now this is, the ancient Chinese. We know pigs are very smart nowadays, okay? But this is the ancient Chinese, interpretation, okay? The force of inner truth must grow great indeed before its influence can extend to such creatures. And dealing with persons as intractable and as difficult to influence as a pig or a fish, the whole secret of success depends on finding the right way to approach. One first must rid oneself of all prejudice and, so to speak, let the psyche of the other person act on one without restraint. Then one will establish contact with him, understand, and gain power over him. When a door has thus been opened, the force of one's personality will influence him. In this way, one finds no obstacles insurmountable. One can undertake even the most dangerous things, such as crossing the great water, and succeed. But it's important to understand upon what the force inner truth depends. This force is not identical with simple intimacy or a secret bond. Close ties may exist also among thieves. It is true that such a bond acts as a force, but since it is not invincible, it does not bring good fortune. Again, that's that Juno-Pluto aspect, right? All association on the basis of common interest holds up only to a certain point. Where the community of interest ceases, the holding together ceases also, and the closest friendship often changes into hate. Only when the bond is based on what is right, on steadfastness, will it remain so firm that it triumphs over everything. So in our markets right now, right, the thieves are friends because they're all making money. But the moment it becomes beneficial for even just one party to break that truce, right, everything will go to chaos. And that's where we are, I think, right now. So this is very poignant for what we described. This is why we did the I Ching. Wind stirs water by penetrating it. Thus, the superior man, when obliged to judge the mistakes of men, tries to penetrate their minds with understanding in order to gain a sympathetic appreciation of the circumstances. In ancient China, the entire administration of justice was guided by this principle. A deep understanding that knows how to pardon was considered the highest form of justice. This system was not without success, for its aim was to make so strong a moral impression that there was no reason to fear abuse of such mildness, for sprang not from weakness, but from superior clarity. Now if we go to our third line, marked from the bottom, here is the source of a man's strength, lies not in himself, but in his relation to other people. No matter how close to them he may be, his center of gravity depends on them. He is inevitably tossed to and fro between joy and sorrow. Rejoicing to high heaven, then sad unto death, this is the fate of those who depend upon an inner accord with other persons whom they love. Here we have only the statement of the law that this is so. Whether this condition is felt to be an affliction of the supreme happiness of love is left to the subjective verdict of the person concerned. So again, speaking to this interconnectedness, and that really, what I think of is how these companies have all been basically cycling their money to each other, right? And this now company has to do well for them to do well, and it's all just this clown show. So truth is going to be what comes next after everything we discuss. Some big truth, revelation, according to this I Ching reading, and then following that, it transforms into taming. Taming. The taming power of the small. Wood over heaven. Wood over heaven. The taming power of the small has success. Dense clouds, no rain from our western region. The image, the wind drives across heaven. The image of the taming power of the small. Thus the superior man refines the outward aspect of his nature. There's no marked lines because this is what it transmuted into. So comments. The hexagram means the force of the small, the power of the shadowy that restrains, tames, and impedes. A weak line in the fourth place, that of the minister, holds the 5 strong lines in check. In the image, it is the wind blowing across the sky. The wind restrains the clouds, the rising beneath of the creative, and makes them grow dense, but as yet is not strong enough to turn them to rain. The hexagram presents a configuration of circumstances in which a strong element is temporarily held in leash by a weak element. It is only through gentleness that this can have a successful outcome. That's interesting. This image refers to the state of affairs in China at the time when King Wen, who originally came from the west, was in the east at the court of the reigning tyrant Chao Xin. The moment for action on a large scale had not yet arrived. King Wen could only keep the tyrant somewhat in check by friendly persuasion. Hence the image of many clouds promising moisture and blessing to the land, although as yet no rain falls. situation is not unfavorable. There is a prospect of ultimate success, but there are still obstacles in the way. And we can merely take precautionary or preparatory measures. Only through the small means of friendly persuasion can we exert any influence. The time has not yet come for sweeping measures. However, we may be able to a limited extent to act as a restraining and subduing influence. To carry out our purpose, we need firm determination within and gentleness and adaptability in external relations. The wind can indeed drive the clouds together in the sky, yet being nothing but air without solid body, it does not produce great or lasting effects. So also an individual, in times when he can produce no great effect in the outer world, can do nothing except refine the expression of his nature in small ways. That's maybe speaking to that time to get your affairs in order, right? We see what's coming. The truth is about to be unleashed, right? And there will be some delaying power from a ministerial influence. You know, the taming power of the small can hold back the storm for a while. This is what the I Ching is suggesting. But eventually, right, something's going to happen, and we are going to need to be prepared for that. So this is the time to, you know, get ready. That's what I'm getting from this. But I think the real big one, this is what it turns into, right? There will be this truth that is unleashed. A truth will be well known. It's probably already happening. But, you know, what comes next is the revelation of this truth. And then we have this period of temporary taming before maybe something much bigger comes. There will be a lag time between a truth revealed and a final judgment that comes down. Very interesting. So that is where we are going to leave it now with this I Ching done. Thank you, Baroness, for the super thanks, and Coconut for the super thanks as well. So yes, thank you all so much for watching, everybody. I've been your host, Stefan Burns. A bit of a different video today, but I wanted to discuss these topics because this is really the direction that I saw this upcoming planetary alignment going, more so in this more societal aspect rather than being of a geo aspect. Though it's certainly possible that we get some big earthquake activity. This is a pretty good signature for that. But we'll have to wait and see. So I'll keep you up to date on all things that's happening with the Earth energetically, with the sun, the stars, the cosmos, and more. Please subscribe to stay up to date. Smash that thumbs up button to help the channel grow. Wishing each and every single one of you well. Please take care of yourselves. I'll see you all in the next video.